what's happening in Gaza is a Holocaust. And what is currently being designed by the Israeli government is the final solution to their Palestinian problem. And as a Holocaust survivor, my reaction is not in my name. Extermination, dehumanization, starvation, blockade, lack of water and medication, the destruction of the health service, the hunting down of doctors, the hunting down of journalists, safe places which turn out to be not safe at all, but traps, concentration camps, all this together makes a clear Holocaust. Clearly, all these elements are not in any way different from similar actions by the Nazis during the Second World War. Gaza is an open-air concentration camp. In a sense, it's an extermination camp because there is no way out other than dying through bombing or disease or lack of food. Only alternative is to agree to be replaced somewhere where you don't want to be. I had not only the experience of the Holocaust and the hiding and the discrimination, etc., but the fighting went through our particular area where we were hiding. When we came out, when it was all over, I saw total devastation, just like when you see the pictures of Gaza. Destroyed buildings, piles of rubble, dead horses, dead people. I see exactly the same in Gaza. However, the great difference is that what I witnessed was a byproduct of two armies fighting. And what I see in Gaza is a deliberate destruction. And I think it's a degree evil, greater evil than what I've seen. The license which has been employed against the Palestinians, it's all based on the Holocaust experience. But rather than making the conclusion that this is something that we have to learn from and make it impossible to be repeated to any other people, they are actually using it as a license to complete lack of accountability towards any other people. I'm thinking now of when Netanyahu says never again is now. This is a very clear reference to the Holocaust experience, justifying whatever they are doing. They are permanent victims no matter how aggressive they are towards others. And another example, when the Israeli ambassador to United Nations, before making his contribution at the Security Council meeting, very theatrically put on a yellow star. I found that particularly upsetting and disgusting because I had to wear the yellow star even at age 7 in 1944. But they continually making this connection and using this cover to acquire impunity, total impunity. And that is deliberate policy of the Zionists and the Israeli state. They create an increase of anti-Semitism the world over because they conflate Judaism with Zionism and their current policies. And as we know, a very large number of Jews who have a sense of justice are against it all. And yet they pretend to be speaking and acting on behalf of all Jews. It's amazingly damaging to Jewish people the world over. So not only has it become obvious that the Israeli state and Zionism are producing a genocide in Gaza, but it is actually the very worst thing that could have happened to the Jewish people who are associated with these dreadful acts. For Jewish people, and particularly anyone who survived the Holocaust or their descendants, to dissociate ourselves from the actions of the Zionist state is extremely important, and how important it is proven by the reaction we get from the general public, who are grateful for our stand, making it clear that the Jewish people are not a solid bloc on the side of the apartheid and genocidal Israel. Because due to the Holocaust, Israel and the Zionists claim total impunity, and we see it in practice that this is accepted all around. They should not be in any way free of being called out as fascists, like we call out fascists elsewhere where we see them. And sadly, Israeli policies are now driven by clearly fascist characters, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, amongst others. The comparison between the extreme actions of the Zionists and the Nazi regime has a long history. Albert Einstein and Hannah Arendt, in their open letter in 1948 in the New York Times, signed by many others as well, had already pointed out that the policies and beliefs of the Zionist organization Herut, which later morphed into the Likud party, had similarities in their ideology to the Nazis. If a comparison with the Nazi philosophies and practices was acceptable then, so soon after the Holocaust, it surely must be acceptable now, and we must protest against the taboo of not making any comparisons between the genocidal actions of Israel and the Nazi regime. This latest initiative of theirs of setting up a so-called humanitarian camp is just another concentration camp. Once entering it, and you are forced to enter it because there are no other places going to be left where you are free from being bombed. So once in that camp, you are not allowed to leave except, apparently, the plan is, except for a foreign country. Supposing you don't want to leave, the conditions inevitably were so awful in these camps because they are overcrowded. There will never be adequate medical services available. So there will be slow diminishing of numbers by wastage and death through deprivation. It's a clear case of genocide. And the parallel is obvious with Nazi camps. Some Nazi leaders, well known for being kind to animals, and because the Jews regarded by them as human animals, they're going to be, like they would be to animals, humanitarian in executing the complete extermination. For example, by trying to avoid them knowing about their fates early enough so that they don't suffer anxiety. This was their kind of humanitarian approach to camps. So it's not a new concept, this kind of humanitarian camp idea. Once you are set upon an ethnic cleansing and a destruction of a people, it's inevitable that you have to prepare it with dehumanization of your subjects whom you're going to perpetrate all this on. Otherwise, you wouldn't get cooperation from anybody in executing this plan. I think the drip effect of being brought up in these conditions distorts people's views both intellectually and emotionally.
How many civilians have been killed in Gaza, from what you know?
Who gives a shit?
Okay, but don't you feel like, for example, children?
Children grow up to be Arabs.
And I found that, sadly, even a part of my family which suffered the Holocaust and ended up in Israel had been completely reformed by this propaganda. This even affected the cousin who was a teenager during her deportation to Auschwitz and was put to work in warehouses where they were sorting the clothes of those who were killed in the gas chambers. And on one day she had to sort her own parents' clothes, which must have been an enormous trauma. Eventually she came back, she survived. And when I met her in Haifa, I found her racist, completely racist, just like all the others. And frankly, I found it almost incomprehensible that somebody with that experience was prey to this propaganda. Any comparison between what's happening in Gaza and the genocide there and the Holocaust, World War II, and any denial or prohibition of a comparison is a taboo which must be broken, because it's quite clear and it's declared by the leadership of the Israeli government that the aim is ethnic cleansing and extermination.
אנחנו משמידים את כל מה שעוד נשאר מהרצועה ולא משאיר אבן על אבן. אני אומר לכם, פשוט תסתכלו על הסרטונים של מה שקורה ברצועת עזה. במשך 1.5 חודשים לא הכנסנו סיוע הומניטרי לרצועת עזה. האם הייתי רוצה להימנע בכלל מהצורך להכניס גרגר לרצועת עזה? גם לא לאזרחים? יכול להיות. גם מים אנחנו לא צריכים לתת לרצועת עזה. אנחנו מפרקים את עזה ומשאירים אותה כאויי חרבות עם הרס מוחלט וחסר תקדים בעולם, והעולם עוד לא עוצר אותנו.
If we witness what is going on daily, the continuous murdering of the Palestinian civilian innocent population, witnessing all that and not protesting or looking the other way is making us accepting a virtual rebirth of a fascist regime, then we have to resist it in order to be on the right side of history. And with regard to Netanyahu, he kind of impersonates all that. He is obviously a war criminal, as it has been established, but we mustn't make the mistake of thinking that it is simply to do with Netanyahu, because the leadership all around him, and unfortunately a majority of the country, are of the same mind.
If you gave me a button to just erase Gaza, every single living being in Gaza would no longer be living tomorrow, I would press it in a second. I would press it right now. Give me that button and press it right now.
There you go.
And I think most Israelis would.
A recent Hebrew University poll has shown that 82% of the Jewish Israeli population agrees that there are no innocents in Gaza. And what is needed is a complete dismantling of the Zionist state and the Zionist movement. And we have to resist the tendency towards the travel in the direction of fascism at every stage, fascism, which happens in stages, incrementally. We can see this tendency, this direction of travel already clearly in, say, Germany and the United States, particularly on university campuses. And more we find this incremental increase of limiting free speech and the freedom of protest here in this country. I was eyewitness to how the leader of Stop the War Coalition was treated. Suddenly, the police converged on him as if by an order and very violently knocked him down and piled on top of him. Because it was a totally unnecessary and shocking piece of violence, I thought it was intended as a message to a movement supporting the Palestinian people that they are after us. Subsequently, people that were standing right next to me, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, were called in for questioning under caution. Others were also called in for questioning under caution, including myself. It's a very difficult problem because at times to resist the official line and tendencies goes with great risks. Nonetheless, if you don't do it, you acquire guilt by association, by indifference. It's one kind of guilt. And there had been, in my experience of the Holocaust, very brave people who went against. It is possible at great risk. Well, I just want to mention an actual example of how brave people can resist, at risk certainly to themselves, but able to resist the evils of the day. There was a friend of our extended family called Emil Wiesmeyer. He was an owner of a printing works. He was not Jewish, but was against what was going on. And at night, at his risk, he was printing false documents to save Jewish people. He took enormous risks. Obviously, if he was discovered, he would have been executed without any doubt. You've got to take risks. This is the conclusion. If you want to be on the right side of history, you can't avoid but have to take risks. You don't have to be a hero, but you have to be able to take a degree of risk, a risk with your career maybe, or your qualifications if you are a student, which some very brave people are doing, but maybe this should be on a much larger scale. As the mainstream media turns the other way and minimizes or doesn't represent the truth about what's going on in Gaza and the West Bank, I think it's extraordinarily important to have platforms like Double Down News, which does tell the true story, and I think it should be supported. So if you can, support Double Down News on Patreon.